The soul of a Jubilee singer.
The Fisk Jubilee Singers, they're the reason why Nashville is called Music City. They've sung before kings and queens in Europe. They've traveled all across the world, and they've brought fame.
Of time with these people I care about and I love, and just to be able to have that time, it means the world to me because it offers so much stability. It anchors me.
You have to think of outside of who you are. So when we're singing, we think about blend and sounding like one voice. To be able to do that, you have to step outside of yourself and care about the person next to you, care about what they're singing, care about what they may be going through. And you have to, in a way, spiritually connect to say, I'm with you.
Good evening, and welcome to the third in the lecture series named George L. White Series. As most of you would know, we are celebrating the 150th anniversary of the Fisk Jubilee Singers. We've had a number of events, and we still have a few to go. And before I speak about this evening's event, I have announcements to make. On October 6th, which is the anniversary date, we will have a convocation on campus here at Fisk University. The guest speaker for this event will be Nikki Giovanni, a graduate of Fisk University. And then on November 11th, there will be a celebration concert held at the Ryman Auditorium. This concert will feature a number of guest artists from Nashville, Tennessee, to singing with the Fisk Jubilee Singers. This concert is named Nashville Celebrates the Fisk Jubilee Singers. So I encourage all of you to look out for further announcements, purchase your tickets, and attend that concert. Tonight's event, as I said, is the third in the series known as the George L. White Lecture Series. In celebration of this anniversary, we decided to remember George L. White, the founder and first director of the Fisk Jubilee Singers. And we are very blessed and fortunate to have this evening Professor Linda Wynn, who teaches at Fisk University. She is a professor in the Department of History and Political Science. She will be speaking on the title, Three Men Named John Work, Their Contributions to African American Music and Fisk University. I encourage all of you to listen attentively because this name, John Work, is extremely important to the history of Fisk University and particularly the Fisk Jubilee Singers. So without further ado, I welcome Professor Linda Wynn to the podium.
Good evening. It is indeed an honor to be here with you this evening as we continue to celebrate the sesquicentennial of the Jubilee Singers. When Dr. Kwami asked me to participate this evening, my first thought was to do something on the Jubilee Singers themselves. And I think I had a title, something like To Sing a Song in a Weary Land. And then I thought about the John W. Works and how important they are to the Fisk University community, the Nashville community, the state of Tennessee, the United States, and indeed around the globe. So this evening, my talk will focus on three men named John Wesley Work and their contributions to African American music and Fisk University. Today, when African American music is recognized globally as having cultural significance, one family stands in the forefront for having given credence to the phenomenon. While many persons have played prominent and significant roles in the advancement of African American music, no presentation of early Negro music is complete without discussing three generations of African Americans who came or are native to the state of Tennessee. John Wesley Work the first, John Wesley Work the second, and John Wesley Work the third, whose family traditions spanned both the 19th and 20th century. These three men, named John Wesley Work, whose family tradition spanned both the 19th and 20th century, their lives not only spanned enslavement, but Reconstruction and the Jim Crow era, and they made substantial musical contributions locally, globally, and to Fisk University. The first work that I will discuss will be John Wesley Work the first. He was born enslaved in 1830. He was sent to New Orleans as a teenager to be held in the service of a Parisian. While there, he gained a sensitive awareness of music, especially opera. He came to Nashville prior to the beginning of the Civil War and remained in the city after the war. He married Samella Boyd, and they became the parents of 5 children: Julia A. Work, Jeannie Daniel Work, John Wesley Work II, Russell Wellborn Work, Elnora Work, and Elnora Work. Work the first became the choir director of Nelson Mary's Church, which was a mission of First Baptist White in downtown Nashville, which ultimately became Nashville's first colored Baptist church. He conducted choirs that performed anthems and presented musicals periodically at the church, many of which were his own compositions. Some of his members of the choir were original Fisk Jubilee Singers. Although he lacked a formal education and rudimentary skills, he made provisions for his daughter, Jeannie Daniel, to study pipe organ and music theory so she could assist him in writing his music and in the accompaniment of the church choir. John Work I died at the age of 93 on February the 4th, 1923, and was later interred in Mount Ararat Cemetery, Nashville's oldest African American cemetery. John Work I left behind a son, John Wesley Work II, sometimes referred to as John Wesley Work Jr., to follow in his musical path. John Wesley Work II was born on August 6, 1873. He attended Nashville Public Schools, and one of his teachers, Minnie Lou Crossway, who challenged discrimination strategically to overcome the city's racialized educational policy by becoming the first African-American woman to pass the teacher exam in Nashville's segregated school system. Crossway, one of Works II's teachers, became cognizant of his aptitude for music. He sang in the high school quartet and performed for many school and community functions, both as a soloist and as a member of the group. He charmed students and patrons with a voice that had matured in presence and sweetness of tone. After high school, Work II furthered his education at Fisk University. Ultimately, he and Crossway became colleagues at the university, where she served in numerous capacities, including math instructor, principal of the normal department, and finally registrar, though she also continued to teach in the normal department until 1916. Upon his entrance at Fisk University, Work majored in history and Latin. Yet he continued to be intrigued by music and was active in the school's musical activities. A voice student of Jenny Robinson, he sang in the Mozart Society, where he was awakened to the true expressiveness of Jubilee music, much of which he later collected and harmonized. Following his Fisk graduation in 1895, he taught in the Tullahoma schools and continued his education at Fisk, working toward the master's degree in Latin, which he earned in 1898. A year later, he married Agnes Morris Haynes of Virginia on April the 26th, 1899, and they became the parents of 6 children. Work II also served as the university's first African-American librarian, a position he held until the completion of his graduate studies. He did postgraduate work at Harvard University and the University of Chicago. After he earned his master's degree, Work II was appointed as instructor of Latin and Greek at Fisk. His astuteness enabled him to advance readily through the collegiate ranks. At age 34, he became full professor and chair of the History and Latin department. He also contributed his talents to the music department. Author of the university's alma mater, the Gold and Blue, he never lost sight of nor concern for the Negro spiritual. Succeeding Adam K. Spence, who in 1880 organized the Mozart Society, Work II took up the task of preserving, studying, developing, and performing African-American religious folk music. The task set before him was not only to instruct students about their musical heritage, but also to bring to the consciousness of America the African-Americans' rich contribution to the country's musical inheritance. Although Fisk University and the Jubilee Singers brought the Negro spiritual to the consciousness of the world, the predominantly white music faculty exhibited an insensibility toward the rendition and investigation of the music that gave voice and song from the African-American experience. The religious music that we hear today on any given Sunday, they considered the Jubilee songs as below standard and felt that African-American music had no niche in a university's curriculum. Realizing that the Negro spiritual was slowly losing its national popularity and general appeal, Work II persevered to reinstate the spiritual to a level of folk songs meritorious of praise. He won the support of Fisk's first president, Erastus Milo Cravath, who charged him to, and I quote, "Concentrate yourself to the development and preservation of the music of your people." There is a Balm in Gilead is a well-known African-American spiritual with a rich history. Its origins cannot be pinpointed, a fact common of folk songs. However, musicologists have tracked back the first print publication as a way of identifying their mark of beginning. Most musicologists agree that the first publication of this particular spiritual is found in Folk Songs of the American Negro, published in Nashville in 1907 and written by John Wesley Work II. There is a Balm in Gilead was recorded in December of 1909 by Work II by the Fisk University Jubilee Quartet, which was integral in the dissemination of the spiritual, especially to predominantly white audiences of the early 20th century. The Jubilee Quartet was a smaller product of the original Jubilee Singers. Because of financial burdens, the ensemble was forced to cut down to a quartet in the early 1900s. In his tome, Folk Song of the American Negro, published in 1915, Work expressed his dismay that the songs of his people were looked upon as a commodity through which African American schools maintained themselves. He stated, and I quote, "In the early days, it was looked upon as a curiosity in the world of song, beautiful, entertaining, but transient. For the world never considered it more than a commodity through which one or two Negro schools maintained themselves. A leading force in collecting spirituals from oral tradition and transcribing them for publication and performing them on tours, yet he acknowledged the history behind them in his book, attempting to go beyond the simple commodity to which he felt audiences were attuned. He further asserted, the reason why Negro songs are so full of scripture, quoted and implied, is that for centuries, the Bible was the only book she was allowed to study, and it consumed all of his time and attention. As a musician, Work led tours of both the Fisk Jubilee Singers, a separate quartet of singers from 1899 to 1916, and wrote songs including Song of the Warrior, If Only You Were There, Negro Lullaby, and Negro Love Song. Along with his brother Frederick, Work compiled new Jubilee songs and folk songs of the American Negro in 1907. Not only was he interested in the preservation of the African American song, he also realized the importance of having control of the business and publishing side of music. Thus, he established the Work Brothers and Hart Music Publishing Company, of which he served as president. During May and June of 1912, John Work II served as a musical director for mass meetings of the YWCA, staged at Nashville's Black-owned and operated Majestic Theater. 2 months later, he led a quartet at the funeral of Sarah Hannah Shepherd, the mother of Ella Shepherd Moore. They sang Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, Steal Away to Jesus, and We Shall Walk Through the Valley. According to Work's Folk Song of the American Negro, Ella's mother had been the inspiration for Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. Work became a leader in the movement to preserve, study, and perform Negro spirituals. With the help of his brother, Frederick Jerome Work, John Wesley Work collected, harmonized, and published a number of songs sung by the enslaved. The first of these collections was New Jubilee Songs, as sung by the Fisk Jubilee Singers in 1901. As a historian, Work II and his brother Frederick joined forces to document Negro spirituals and publish them. One of these collections included the song, Go Tell It on the Mountain, a song featured heavily in the civil rights movement during the 1950s and 60s, as it is today in Christmas church services. Before John Work's arrival at Fisk, the Nashville press had often complained that while the Fisk Jubilee Singers had delighted almost the entire world with their wonderful singing, the people of Tennessee are, in the main, strangers to their voices. Work treated the local public to his revival of the spirit of the Jubilee Singers in Nashville, and the Tennessean properly declared Work a real civic asset. At the March 20th, 1922 Fisk Annual Jubilee Concert held at the Ryman Auditorium, the evening's extensive program included Steal Away to Jesus, Study War No More, Go Down Moses, I'm So Glad Trouble Don't Last Always, I Got Shoes, Good News, The Chariots Are Coming, Do Lord Remember Me, Couldn't Nobody Hear Me Pray, and of course, Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. The Tennessean reported, Professor John W. Work, who has done such a wonderful work in training and directing the courses, was called upon to speak. He said that the young people, by their singing, speak for me. That illustrates how he connected with his students, and though he may have directed the students, it was the students that he wanted to be out front. Work trained and performed with professional and student groups of the Jubilee Singers. His wife, Agnes Haynesworth, was a singer who helped train the Fisk group. Because of negative feelings toward African American music at Fisk, Work II was forced to resign in 1923. On August the 15th, John W. Work submitted his letter of resignation to the president and the Fisk Board of Trustees, which they accepted without question. According to Agnes Work, and I quote, "The alumni were dumb. The president was an open enemy. The trustees were mystified. John resigned, and on that day, his heart literally broke. Not long after Work II's resignation, the student body and the alumni unleashed a revolt against President McKenzie, accusing him of efforts to, and I'm quoting, disorganize and discourage students, petty rules without explanation, favoring white people in preference of colored people in everything, attempts at coercion and absolute domination of Fisk students. Exasperated by Mackenzie's unyielding repression, the students staged a protest. Mackenzie's response was to call the Nashville police to campus, where the students were brutalized and arrested. Consequently, Mackenzie expelled the protesting students. The student body turned the protest into a general boycott of classes. The controversy raged for weeks and attracted national publicity and a racially polarized local community. Excuse me. Support for President McKenzie eroded, and in April of 1925, he was forced to submit his resignation as president of Fisk University. Notwithstanding, it was too late to save John W. Work II. The same year that he resigned, Work II became president of Roger Williams University, which was one of 4 Freedmen's colleges in Nashville, and it was a position he held until his death on September the 7th, 1925, 2 years after his father's demise. John W. Work II remains were interred in Nashville's Greenwood Cemetery. The papers of John W. Work II are housed at Emory University's Stuart A. Rose Manuscript, Archives, and Rare Book Library. Work II attained his goal and became widely acclaimed as the rescuer and preservationist of Negro music. His book, Folk Songs of the American Negro, was one of the first extensive studies of the origin and development of Negro music. His devotion to the preservation of African American religious music did not end with him. His son, John Wesley Work III, not only carried on his father's lifelong work, but expanded the legacy left him by his father. The eldest of 7 children born to John W. Work and Agnes Haynes Work, John Wesley III began his life in Tullahoma, Tennessee on June the 15th, 1901. Subsequently, his father accepted a teaching position at Fisk, and his parents enrolled him in kindergarten at Fisk Daniel Hale Training School. He completed his entire primary, secondary, and collegiate education at Fisk University. The descendant of noted musicians and preservationists of African American music, Works III's interest in music developed early in life, where he participated in musical affairs with his family. At the age of 12, he studied piano, and in high school began composing. Work III composed his first composition, Mandaloo, for which his father wrote the lyrics at age 17. Although a history major during his collegiate career at Fisk University, Work III, after being graduated from Fisk in 1923, decided to study music with the intention of becoming a professional singer. During his matriculation at Fisk, Work III met his future wife, Edith McFall, from South Carolina. In 1927, he studied at the Institute of Musical Art, now Juilliard School of Music, and 3 years later earned the Master's of Arts degree from Columbia University, writing his thesis on African American songs. Work pursued additional research on that subject for the rest of his life. In 1933, he received a Bachelor of Music degree from Yale University with the help of 2 consecutive Julius Rosenwald Foundation fellowships. Work's mother died in 1927, and he returned to Nashville to assume responsibility for the family and to complete his mother's appointment at Fisk as a trainer of singing groups. His responsibilities included directing the organization, now Fisk University Choir, that is purported to be Tennessee's oldest chartered musical organization. A year later, he married Edith McFall. With the recent demise of his mother, John Work III and his wife assumed responsibility for his brother and sisters until they were in a position to care for themselves. John and Edith had 2 children, John Wesley Work IV and Frederick Taylor Work. 3 years after the death of his mother, Work earned the master's degree of music education from Columbia University. His master's thesis entitled Folk Songs of the American Negro, which was later expanded upon and included 230 Jubilee songs and folk arrangements by Work. In 1940, the expanded compilation of Jubilee songs and folk arrangements were published under the title American Negro Songs and Spirituals. Between the years of 1927 and 1930, as a vocal recitalist, Work III performed in Nashville and throughout the region. He also fulfills numerous engagements with the soloists in Theodore Du Bois's 7 Last Words of Christ and similar compositions. From 1935 to 1942, Work collected Black American secular and sacred folk music in a variety of styles in Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina, Alabama, and Mississippi. In his collecting work, he emphasized performance styles and musicianship. After earning several degrees in music, Work III returned to Fisk University Music Department, where he taught music education and theory. Following in his father's footsteps in 1946, he became the second John W. Work to direct the Jubilee Singers, thereby carrying on his family's church choir tradition when he became director of the Fisk Jubilee Singers. 2 years earlier, he delivered 2 papers on Negro folk music to the university's first Race Relations Institute, sponsored by the American Missionary Association, the university's founding organization. Later, in 1951, he was appointed chair of the music department. From 1946 to 1956, Work published more than 50 compositions. He received an award from the Fellowship of American Composers for his composition, The Singers, in 1946. Based upon a poem by Henry W. Longfellow, a cantata, it was first performed at the Fellowship of American Composers Convention in Detroit. After spending 3 months in Haiti, he wrote a suite for strings centered on Haitian themes. Another composition by Work III, Golgotha, based upon a poem by his colleague, Arnold Bontemps. The Fisk Choir performed Golgotha during the 1949 Festival of Music and Art. His composition, My Lord, What a Morning, was performed for the Festival of Music and Art in 1965 by choruses representing choirs from Germany, Sweden, Great Britain, South America, France, Yugoslavia, Japan, Canada, and the United States. The Fisk Choir toured the United Nations and performed My Lord, What a Morning in the Philharmonic Hall for the festival's gala concert. Like his father, John W. Work III collected songs by traveling and attending church services in remote areas. He described the paradox of recording a folk song in an untitled manuscript, saying that no matter the skill of the transcriber, the singer was unlikely to perform the song in the same way each time. So it's only possible to collect variants of a real song. This held true for both the notes and the dialect of the songs were collected, which differed by region. As gospel music began to emerge in the African American church services, Work III saw the potential of a new musical form, and he stated, "This type of folk music will continue to be used and even enjoy a greater popularity in time to come. The folk felt a stirring from a new music. They are busy creating it." Although many musicians did not consider African American folk songs to have musical credence, Work III gave Negro folk song a musical form. His book, American Negro Songs and Spirituals, made an invaluable contribution to musicology. The book contains 230 religious and secular songs, as well as the origins and nature of the various types of African American folk songs. Work III, like his father, had an interest in folk songs. In his view, African American songs represented a total mirror of life up to and inclusive of Reconstruction. In an article entitled Changing Patterns in Negro Folk Songs that appeared in the 1940 Journal of American Folklore, it centered on sacred music performance practices, which drew on his extensive research in oral traditions and choral performances throughout Nashville. He was interested in and was captivated by the styles he heard at Zima Hill Primitive Baptist Tabernacle in Nashville. In a profile written for the Nashville Conference of African American History and Culture by the late Dr. Revis L. Mitchell, Zima W. Hill was a minister, a funeral home owner, and a notable leader in Nashville's African American community. Hill explained to Work those newer styles of rhythmic piano accompaniment to the newer gospel songs then in favor among the youth helped bring in younger members to the church and to the choir. Just prior to his demise, Work III wrote a series of articles for the Harvard Dictionary of Music on blues, bop, jazz, and Negro music. Although the full extent of his work in the blues was not appreciated until long after his death, he left a valuable legacy of field recordings that includes the first Library of Congress sized by Muddy Waters. In addition to many other recordings from Mississippi, Nashville, and Fort Valley, and Georgia, Work's historic descriptions of the 1941-42 Library of Congress project in Mississippi, complete with musical transcriptions, were published in the acclaimed work Lost Delta, found in 2005. Throughout his life, John W. Work was the recipient of numerous awards and honors, including the National Association of Negro Musicians Award for Achievement and Distinguished Service, and an honorary doctorate of music degree from Fisk University. Fisk General Alumni Association honored Work III on many occasions, and the Fisk class of 1941 commissioned the eminent African-American artist Aaron Douglas to paint a portrait of Work III upon his retirement from the university in 1966. In June of 1963 and 1966, respectively, 2 concerts were held in his honor. A member of the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers, better known by the acronym ASCAP, among other numerous organizations. Not long after his retirement in 1966, John W. Work joined his father and grandfather on May the 17th, 1967, when he departed this life at Hubbard Hospital due to heart failure. Like the John W. Works who preceded him, John W. Work III left behind a priceless legacy. An editorial in the Nashville Banner summed up his life. Death does not silence the song. For contributions to human uplift through music, he will be remembered. The 3 men named John W. Work made indelible contributions to Fisk University, the city of Nashville, the state of Tennessee, and indeed to those around the globe. Known as the rescuers and preservationists of African American religious and folk music, the gifts they bestowed upon the field of music is seen in their life's labor as prolific composers, educators, choral conductors, ethnomusicologists, and authors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Wynn. This was very enjoyable to learn about the 3 John Works. I found it interesting that John Work the First, for example, taught some of the original Fisk Jubilee Singers, some of who you see here, for example, Maggie Porter. And then, of course, as we were told this evening, his son, John W. Work II, became a teacher here, and we should really learn more about him because of the challenges that he faced, as we were told. And he faced those challenges because he realized the importance of the Negro spirituals to the African Americans and wanted very much to sustain the Negro spirituals and help the young students here at that time to know this music. But I'll leave it to you. Students, do you have any questions that you may want to ask? If you have questions, we have a microphone here. You can stand there and ask.
My name is Jeffrey Casey, and I'm a senior here at Fisk University, business administration major. And when you spoke about the portrait that was made of John Work III that Aaron Douglas did, is that still here on Fisk University campus, or is that still kind of in our possession?
It is, first of all, I really don't know the answer to your question. I would really direct you to Professor Sheets, who can tell you if it is here. I don't know exactly, what may have happened after it was commissioned in 19.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, my name is Erin Brooks. I'm a senior. Louder. Okay. Oh, just stand and speak. Okay. Well, my name is Erin Brooks. I'm a senior music major at Fisk University. And my question is, I wrote it down. Would you say that the works had an influence on music as we know it today in this generation? Although I know you spoke on like rock music and country music and of course blues, but how would you think that they influence music as today?
I think music today is definitely influenced by the music of yesterday. Whether you're talking about the spirituals or whether you're talking about gospel music or hip hop or rap or R&B, if you listen closely to it, to all of the music, you hear some similarities from the generations that preceded. The blues, jazz. I think it's a strand that runs through our musical traditions. And I might add, that has been adopted by other groups.
Right. I agree. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Now, you all remember I'm a history professor, not a music professor, okay?
Hello, my name is Andrew Davis, music education major. I was wondering, I've studied the spirituals and its influence on other cultures throughout the world, and I know that We Shall Overcome has had many influences across the world's oppressed people, and I was wondering, through any of the work's travels, has their music stood the test of time as We Shall Overcome?
Oh, I would say most definitely.
Okay.
When I came in, the Jubilee Singers were practicing, and and I heard songs that were sung by some of the original Jubilee Singers. Yes, the music has definitely stood test over time. Go Tell It on the Mountain.
Right.
You hear that all the time.
Most definitely.
Steal Away to Jesus. You hear that.
But like in relation to like other cultures, not just our own history and.
We live in a global society, and we just didn't start living in a global society.
Yes, ma'am.
The Jubilee Singers exhibited that when they made their travels across the world, and certainly I feel that that music left some sort of indelible mark across cultures.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Even if you listen to some country music, you hear some of these spirituals that are being sung by country music artists. So,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
you're welcome.
Questions?
Did I do that great a job that you all don't have any questions?
You want to move to the
Move to.
I just had a comment.
just speak.
The microphone is confusing for me. But I just wanted to say you explained everything very well. It was easy to keep up with what you were saying and how the works how that all three of them influenced almost everything in music as we know it today. Not just for the Jubilee Singers, but for us as an African American race, us as a people. And then piggybacking off, yeah. Well, when Andrew asked if you think it influenced other cultures and stuff of that nature, me personally, I feel as if we can educate people as much as we want to, but if they don't want to take that culture and like, quote unquote, run with it, that's honestly not our job. We give them the information for it, so.
Yeah, you know, and I think that the works, and I'll include all three of them because I think all three had some impact. You know, we don't know a whole lot about John W. Work the first, but the mere fact that he was over the choir in a, basically, you know, it was an enslaved situation, but they allowed him to have music at the church. Our music, African American music, has been an influence from time immemorial, I think. You know, as a historian, that's what I think. You know, if I go back and remember people like Elvis Presley, for example. Elvis Presley was singing a whole lot of black music.
He was. Big Mama Thornton actually sang Hound Dog.
Actually, and I attended a musical conference once, and it was stated that most of the songs, early songs that Presley was singing, were not his own, and they really did come from African Americans. And even he admitted that that's who he listened to. So, you know, we impact not only musically, but culturally. I mean, you know, how many things that we have done that have been appropriated and used by other cultures, and, you know, all of a sudden they forget where it came from. So, yeah, we've made innumerable contributions. And I think the John W. Works are in part responsible for that, especially when it comes to the folk songs and the spirituals. And, you know, when you look at John W. Work II, the tenacity that he had, you know, even gaining the approval of the first president, and the first president telling him, preserve the music of your people. He's due a lot of credit. And, you know, you can see that it's passed down from generation to generation to generation. Unfortunately, we don't know what John W. Work IV is doing. But I had the opportunity to interview, and that's where some of this came from, John W. Work III's wife back in the 1970s, late 1970s. And she gave me a lot of information and insight. And it was really kind of funny because I called her and asked her for the interview, and she granted it, and she lived right over here in the workhouse. And when I came in, she said, "Do I know you?" And I said, "No, I don't really think so." And she asked me, "Do you have a cousin named so-and-so?" And I said, "Yes." You went with your cousin, and I carried you all to a dog show. She loved dog shows. And then when she said that, I remembered, yes, you did. You know, I was maybe 7 or 8 years old. But, you know, just for the mere fact that she looked at me, and I guess maybe I hadn't aged that much at that time, and could remember that I looked familiar. I mean, and it was a fantastic interview. She showed me, you know, some of the artifacts and things that she had. So, yeah, I enjoyed that.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Hezekiah Robinson. I am a junior, double major, biology and music major here at Fisk University. And my question is, can you expound upon John Work II's, his works in the connection to Emory University?
I don't know if his works, when you say his works, you don't mean his performances, compositions, and things like that.
Like him, some of that, and then him as a whole, as a person.
Oh, the only thing I was saying about that is that his papers are housed at Emory.
Okay.
That's what I was saying.
Okay.
Okay, not, not that he performed it anything
Okay.
at Emory, but somehow or another, Emory ended up with some of his
Are they in
papers.
any way connected to, was he a member or did he have any connections to Emory as to why they got them, or were they just able to possess those?
Yeah, I mean, you don't know what, family members may have done. They may have said, that they could have the papers. And, acquiring papers is not necessarily an inexpensive venture, believe it or not. Some people, like, what I'm getting ready to do, I've got a whole bunch of books that I'm probably getting ready to give to Fisk University Library. But some people, when they leave certain papers and artifacts, they get some sort of financial
All right, thank you.
compensation for it. Yes.
Hi, my name is Jaden Lawrence. I am a freshman secondary education, concentration in English and piano major. Double major, sorry. My question is, this may be difficult to answer, but like being a historian, seeing how history repeats itself, and we as Black people, and specifically like Fisk Jubilee Singers and Negro Spirituals, have this brief moment of global or national impact, and then yet after a certain amount of time, just it resorts back to just being concentrated here in Nashville, Tennessee, or specifically here on Fisk University campus. How can we not only allow people to appropriate our culture, but make sure that it is a lasting impact, that making sure that we're always getting the credit that is due to the ancestors that came before us?
Well, they say the imitation is the highest form of honor, when other people imitate what you do. I think that the contributions that were made by the John W. Works, the Jubilee Singers, and other singing groups associated with the university, I don't think it has detracted from Fisk at all. I don't think that, if you really look at the works, why did they record? Why did they put down into books all of the information that they learned about the songs and Negro spirituals and the folk songs? It wasn't just for our community. It was for everybody. I don't think that our heritage should necessarily be misappropriated, okay? But I do think that it is shared. And that's not a bad thing to me. I don't think it's, wrong. And Fisk is known internationally. The Jubilee Singers are known internationally. The Jubilee Singers have an impact internationally on music. When you heard me list all of the various European countries, that were singing the songs, I don't consider that an appropriation as much as I consider it an acknowledgement of the music that has been produced by people who were formerly enslaved. And especially when you understand how we were thought of as a group of people, lacking in intelligence. Notice I said John W. Work the first lacked the rudimentary skills, but he had critical thinking skills, right? He knew he did not know how to write music, but he did what? He provided an opportunity for his daughter to study music the organ and to learn how to write, to help him do what he needed to do. That's a lesson to be learned from a man that was enslaved. No, he wasn't educated, but he knew music. He knew enough to know, I don't know how to write it, but I've got a daughter that I'm gonna send and let her get lessons in organ and learn how to write so she can assist me. That's critical thinking skills. Okay? So I think that, you know, any attribution that they want to give to the gifts that we have given to America, and especially right through here, in this period where we are being maligned almost every day, and it's so strategic that you almost don't realize you're being maligned. So, yeah, you know, I think it's great, personally. I hope I answered your question.
You did. I just want to, like, I want other people in other communities, because like I never heard of anything close to what I'm hearing now at an HBCU, specifically Fisk, back at my, you know, hometown in Northern Virginia, DC, and even when I was like, living in North Carolina. So I would like to see our community be as empowered before they get to an HBCU as well as after they get to an HBCU.
Well, see, that gets into another whole thing, and you're gonna make me drift over to my public administration, because I also teach public administration. The reason we are not empowered is because, number one, I don't think we understand how government works. I don't think we understand how school boards work. I don't think we understand who chooses the books that you are given. It emanates from the state Board of Education or the Department of Education. There is a textbook commission that decides what books you're going to get. And I can tell you that because Texas has the largest public schools, that the books that they chose or choose generally are the ones that will be disseminated across the nation. We don't attend school board meetings. We can't be empowered if we're not at the table. And we're not at the table. We come up with excuses. I mean, you know, and some of them are legitimate. I understand parents have to work. Some parents are working 2 and 3 jobs. It may be impossible, but maybe you might be able to ask your mother or a friend or somebody, will you go and attend this school board meeting so I'll know what's going on? The other thing is, right now, in Tennessee and in several other states across the nation, you have heard, hopefully, this discussion about critical race theory. First of all, on the collegiate level, we don't even teach undergrad. We don't even teach critical race theory. So you certainly didn't get it in high school, or you didn't get it in middle school. What they are doing is that they are trying to silence and take it out from in front of you, your history, okay? And they don't want anybody else to know it. Why? Because they say that it is too difficult for their children to grasp, understand, and be confronted with and by. That's what they're saying. If you listen to what's being said from school board meetings, now I'm gonna get on my soapbox as a professor, not as the lecturer for tonight. You all need to get off of social media, or if you're on social media, you need to be selective about your social media. On social media, things like Twitter, there are a bunch of historians out there. There are a bunch of black journalists out there that are telling the truth about what is going on. But you don't know it if you have your little select group of followers, be it Twitter, Facebook, and Facebook is becoming, in my opinion, more dangerous every day. What else is it? Instagram, TikTok. TikTok especially. And what's the other one? I'm missing one. Snapchat. Okay? Huh? You all need to watch that. You know, when I was coming up, and this is way back in the day, I remember when the churches, because I was in segregated schools, okay? And I went to a private school the first 9 years. Last 4 were in public school. But the churches used to give programs, and you would hear people get up and recite Paul Laurence Dunbar, or they would tell you about the founder of Black history. You would get your historical footing in the church. We're not doing that anymore. We may have a program during Black History Month. Maybe. But the churches today, you know, they've become consumed with so many other different things that they are not performing that educational piece that you used to get in the church, and you really didn't even realize, Dr. Kwami, that you was being educated on your own history or your own culture. So we need, you all need to pay attention to what's going on, because when they say you cannot teach about enslavement, can you imagine what's going to happen to the students that you all left behind in high school, in middle school, in elementary school? It's going to be sad. And as I tell my students, history's a jealous mistress. And what I mean by that is you have to read. You have to read. And if we don't read, we don't know. And when we don't know, they can tell us anything. Okay? So that's my comment. Again, I hope I answered your question.
There are many people who are also watching online, as I said, and sending in very beautiful comments. But one person has a question for you, and this will be our last question. This person wants to know how you became interested in researching the Work family.
How shall I answer that? I worked for another organization, state agency, and I was the first African American, the only African American to this day. And they had a newsletter that carried articles. And the very first article that I wrote, notice I said this was in the late 70s when I interviewed Mrs. Worth. The first article that I wrote was about Jubilee Hall. Now, there's a long story about why I wrote about Jubilee Hall, because, as I said, I was the first and the only, and there was what I considered to be some kind of shenanigans going on about making and approving grants. And the university was up for a grant. And I overheard my colleagues say that they were not going to give it to Fisk University, which prompted me to write about Jubilee Hall. It's not really known, I don't think, on campus, but my cousin was married to Dr. Lawson's son, who was president at Fisk University at the time. And I like, told the director, if Fisk University does not get a grant, I will call a press conference. And this is in the mid-'70s, not that far removed from the Civil Rights Act of 1965, or was 64, 68. And that was all I said. Someone else told the director that I was indirectly related to Dr. Lawson. Needless to say, I didn't have to call a press conference. Fisk University was given the grant. But that's how I became interested. It was from that first article on Jubilee Hall, and I thought, ooh, I was doing something, and I was reading about the works for some reason. Oh, it was the workhouse, a marker or something was coming up. And I realized there were 3 John W. works, and they were all in music. And I think the piece that I wrote then was the John W. works, 3 generations of music, or something to that effect. So that's really how I became interested in the John W. works. It was really through Jubilee Hall, and it was sort of a progression. And, I learned to use the pen. The pen can be a very powerful instrument to get across what I wanted to get across without saying a whole lot. I didn't have to be overly active. I could use the pen and tell the story, just like the John W. Works did. I'm telling the story, and I think at that time we had a readership of about 8,500 people, a majority of whom was white. And I wanted our story to reach them and how we intertwine with Tennessee history. So that's really how it came about writing.
We could stay here and continue listening to you and learning a lot from you. Fisk University, of course, is rich in history, a lot of history that we are still yet to learn. So I am personally interested in continuing with this lecture series, and I'll talk to you. We'll find other topics, because if we don't learn our history so that we can pass it on to future generations, then that important part of our history will be lost. I know there are students on this campus who, for example, don't know that it was John Worth Jr. who composed our alma mater. But if we are not told, we wouldn't know. So first of all, for those who are watching online, we thank you very much for joining us this evening. And as I said, we will find other opportunities and share things with you about the history of Fisk University, history of African Americans, anything that relates to our history that we need to know. And for you who are here, thank you very much for joining us. And Professor Wynn, you are full of history. And it's been an honor for us to have you to share with us this evening. So we thank you very much. Let's give her another round of applause. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Everyone remember, October 6th is Jubilee Day, and then November 11, we have our Ryman concert. Thank you.